Welcome. It is good to see you. We appreciate you joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Most of our viewers have heard this fall that you were diagnosed with cancer. So first and foremost, I think everyone wonders, how are you?
I'm doing well, actually, very well. I had the radiation treatment. I had a couple complications, but it's all good now and everything's fine. So, and I'm doing some tests coming up next week in regard to whether this is genetic or not. I have 2 daughters and granddaughters and all, so I thought that would be a good idea to do that, but worked out really well.
And why did you decide to share this and go public with your diagnosis and what you were going through?
Well, I wasn't going to. I was very hesitant to even tell my kids until I knew exactly what I was diagnosed with and when it was going to take place and what I was going to process was going to be. But I think as we got into it, and my daughter, who was going with me for everything, said, "Mom, you ought to think about doing something." And actually, first time I went to the surgeon, I said, I don't want anybody to know this. And he said, "Okay, well, that's all right. It's your privilege." Said, "But, it doesn't hurt. You might be helping people by..." So that was the first seed. Second one was my daughter. So I thought, well, maybe, and who am I to not want to tell people, and why am I not wanting I didn't want the attention, basically. And I did get wonderful attention and cards and everything else, and it really was nice and heartwarming. But so we did a little statement, and then I was getting my hair cut, and I read it to the hairdresser while she was cutting my hair. I said, "So what do you think?" And she said, "Someone is going to go to the phone and make an appointment." And I said, "Well, maybe. Yeah, it's a good idea." So we went through with it, and we announced it and made the statement, and we did an interview with Mark Mulholland, whose wife had died of breast cancer at 37, which is a lot different than 80 years old, so there's no comparison.
And Mark is a newsman down in the Albany area, well known.
And actually, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, the majority leader, called me the next morning because she had heard it, and we've always been friends in the Senate. And she said, "I'm calling you because I want to tell you, I called this morning and made an appointment." And she said, "I just hadn't thought that it was necessary as you got older or anything, and so I am a couple years late in doing it," and she said she did it. So, so I guess that was why, and it worked out all right.
You didn't have to run for re-election this year, so you didn't have to deal with that at the same time, have a campaign going on. But in speaking of that, you didn't have to worry about a re-election, but has it been difficult over the past few months to keep working while all of this was going on?
No, because everything's virtual. So, just had to make sure on virtual you had a nice shirt on, top on, and you could still have jeans on or sweatpants or whatever. And a lot of phone calls and a lot of working from home. And I have been going to the office now in Glens Falls. I haven't been back to Albany since March 9th. So it's unusual. What an unusual year to have for your last year. It's just been mind-boggling.
When you announced a year ago that you were planning to retire, you of course had no idea what this final year was going to be like.
No.
Has it been difficult as a lawmaker to try to do the work that you need to do? You weren't able to meet with your fellow senators, and has that been difficult, and has that resulted in the Senate really not getting the work done that you had hoped you would this year?
Yeah, I think it has had an effect on it. We're not down there, we're not seeing each other or anyone. A lot of Zoom calls, and you can talk on those, and you can listen and all. And I've always relied on the telephone. I think throughout all my years in the legislature, my best tool to work with was the telephone. Call people up, ask them the questions, solve the problem, or get the information you needed. I do find difficult even with, I have 8 people on staff, now 7. We already had one went to work for BOCES. But collaboration and coordination is difficult because you're not seeing each other and you're not all talking all the time. So I've missed that part. And I've missed having people come in the office. We've had a few people come in the office, but for the most part, it's all on the phone. And we still have done a lot of work. And actually, this past Monday, I was home. I was busy all day long. And by 6 o'clock, I still had a list of things that would carry over for the next day. So comes in spurts, that's for sure. But it's just been a wonderful position to be in. I've loved it, and this year was difficult because of no face-to-face with people and working with colleagues in Albany and all of that kind of thing.
And hardship for people. I mean, people losing their jobs,
Oh.
the effect on the hospitals, the effect on schools, the effect on businesses. So obviously you've felt that, and your constituents have felt it directly.
I have, and you know, as much as you try to call and find out why an arcade in Lake George, who has taken out a third of the machines, who has sanitizers all over the place, and has people walking by looking in the window like, why can't I come in? Can't be open, and casinos are open. It's just unfair, and like the guy said, I haven't made a nickel since February, and we have 2 of them in Lake George. So, and they had lots of people walking the streets. Lake George had a busy summer, just like Lake Placid. People looking for some place to go and do things. And, you know, so many businesses. The big boats on Lake George, they have a capacity of 300 on the St. Sacrament, and yet she could have 150 people for dinner, but they could not have a wedding or a gathering of 150 people on the boat for dinner. So there's just a lot of things, you know, because this was done so quickly and everybody's trying to do the best they can, but there's not a lot of there's a lot of inequity in the whole thing. And you know, we get hit with a lot of the way things are happening in New York City, so we'll blanket the whole state with these restrictions. So I think the governor, as it went along, got more into the regions and trying to isolate some of the areas that were doing well. But we continue to get these spikes, and you know, I think it's better. I think they've found out how to treat people who have COVID and get them better, and people are getting better after having it. But you know, we need to get to the point where we can get back to what's going to be our new normal. And I do think that things will change. I think there'll be a lot more virtual things and fewer large gatherings, all that, you know, for a while at least.
And it may have quite an impact on businesses, restaurants in the long run. We may,
it does,
over the next several months or years, see a number of businesses go out of business.
We already are.
Can't recover.
We're seeing some restaurants that are deciding, you know, I needed the summer to be really good so I could get through the winter. And so with 50% capacity, even with outdoors and indoor, it's not enough to get me through the winter. And they have closed. I know one restaurant is open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so there's a lot of people. The Great Escape, I mean, they hire lots and lots and lots of people during the summer, none of them here. You know, our colleges, Plattsburgh, I mean, no students here in December and January. That affects the businesses up here. And it's affecting the colleges, and the community colleges are really hurt. So, and now we're getting, I was in the office yesterday, and Keith handles unemployment. He said, we are getting more unemployment calls, all new people signing up for unemployment. So there's an awful lot of people hurting. And I don't know how we recover, truthfully.
Is it disappointing for you, with so much up in the air, that this is the year you're leaving? Or are you?
Well, I'm glad I'm leaving, to tell you the truth. I mean, there's so many things you can't do anything about. And that's frustrating. Yeah. You know, you can make calls, you can make the case, you can call again, you can call again, but you haven't solved it. So it's very difficult.
And we'll talk a little bit more. You're certainly not leaving public service. You have been appointed to the Order Board now, and so you'll be taking part in that, and that's been near and dear to your heart for many years.
Yes.
Lake Placid and Orta and the Olympic venues. The state has pumped a lot of money in the past few years into Orta, $250 million, and
Absolutely.
so that's with the 2023 World University Games coming up. That's encouraging for you to see how well Lake Placid is doing.
We really are. And, you know, we've called ourselves the sports capital of the world and of the country, for sure, the winter sports capital. But when you talk about having the 1932 and 1980 Olympics, that's historic. But you can't remain historic. And the biggest thing that I had concern about is the Olympic Training Center is in Lake Placid. There's only 2 of them in the country. The other one's in Colorado, and my son lived there too, and I can't think of the name, which one place it was, but that's where that one is. But they have an operating budget of multiple millions of dollars a year. It's like between $2 and $3 million a year for the athletes that come there and for what they do and how they operate and the people they employ. But they're not going to come if the training facilities are not top level, if they're not what they're going to see when they go to a World Cup. They can't train on one type of facility and then move to the next one with the same skill. So we needed to have the venues really updated, and it's beyond what I could have imagined. They're all going to be, and our ski jumping facility will be the best in this country. I know it'll be the best in the Northeast, but I think it's going to be the best in the country.
And with the improvements at Whiteface, with the Cliffside Coaster now,
Yeah.
other attractions that bring in the tourist really year-round.
Yeah, I did the coaster.
You did?
I did, yeah. The order board went and had a tour, and so it was like the Friday before my 80th birthday, and everybody's trying to decide if they were going to do it, and I said, well, I've been thinking it's something I could do for my 80th birthday, so I'm doing it, you know. And it's really something. The ride up is as beautiful as the ride down. It's a lot slower, but you know, and once you're on the coaster, it took me a few minutes to realize that this car is not coming off this rail. It's hooked on, so then you could enjoy it. But it was fun. So, but all of these things will attract people. It's the economic engine, as is Gore Mountain, to the Warren County area and southern Essex County. And, you know, they're doing really, really well. The ice arenas are going to be improved. There's so much taking place right now, and it's exciting. And I'm grateful to the governor for joining us and supporting these games that they're coming here. This is like a step down from the Olympics, but it's still going to be tough for us to accommodate the housing and all the people coming and going. But there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. We have a housing developer ready to, hopefully by March, we'll be ready to get going on this. And he's going to be creating, you know, housing for employees for the people that work in the Lake Placid area. So the median incomes, it's like 80% of the median income. So that's another big benefit we're going to have from it. So yeah, so there's a lot to do, and I'm glad I'm going to be able to continue to do this because I've seen the games, I've traveled, and I think everybody's going to be very happy with them, and New York State will be very proud of hosting them.
The World University Games in 2023, and then I always have to ask, is the hope there that down the road we could be part of a bid for another Winter Games, either a statewide bid or a cross-border bid?
It puts us in the running for World Cups because we're going to be state-of-the-art on every one of our venues. So a lot of those are big things, and they're all televised, and people sit at home and look at that and say, oh, I haven't been to Lake Placid or the Adirondacks. I'd like to do that. And so that's good. There's the Youth Olympics. That would be a good one for us. And there are the worldwide Special Olympics. That's a possibility. You know, those are all things that once we prove ourselves with these games, I think we can move on to other things.
The International Olympics probably grown too big for Lake Placid?
They're probably too big, but they're very spread out. When you see them in other countries, you find out that the venues are an hour and a half apart. Well, we can do that. You know, we have Plattsburgh, we have Albany, we have, well, they always talked about doing something with Montreal, but, you know, get the border open first, and we'll look at those things.
You mentioned the governor, working with the governor. You have worked well with Governor Cuomo over the past decade. He's done, you've said before that he has helped do a lot in the North Country.
He has, but the way we started working together was on shared services. You know, I have kids that live down south in Kentucky and Tennessee, and we used to go to Alabama. And if you're in those states, you are either in a county or a city. There are no towns and villages, so there's less government, but they're newer. You know, they didn't grow and they don't have the history that we have in the historic governments. And so I've always felt, and you know, not everyone agrees with me, but that less government is better, and that, you know, really as much as people like their village, you can do without them, and you can have less taxes, but you have fewer jobs. And at one time, when I first got elected, the biggest employer in the Adirondacks and the North Country was government, some form of government. And I think fortunately that's not the case. Our tourism has grown, our colleges and university have done pretty well until now, so we'll see what happens after this. But we have more smaller companies and bigger companies in Plattsburgh. We've met really with the base redevelopment, we have lots of new companies here, lots of Canadian companies working here too. So, you know, the dissolution of villages, that's the only form of government that you can create or dissolve on your own with a village vote. And so the governor had an idea when he was in the Attorney General's office about doing this, and I sponsored the bill that would make it easier. And that was tough because we had people in our conference that were totally against it. And actually, I think we had 15 no votes out of 38 in the Republican conference. And when you're a sponsor of a bill, you usually hope that your conference is all voting with you. But I can remember one senator stood up and he said, you know, I was talking about this at home. And, you know, my wife said to me, aren't Republicans ever for anything? So he said, so I'm for this bill. So I thought, well, he helped a couple more people come on board. And that was the first time I worked with the governor, and Jim Malatras and all the people that worked in his office. And, you know, so very supportive of that and of any kind of sharing of services. And I've sponsored bills where, you know, if you can see a contract and they have a good bid and you can then jump on someone else's bid, another county, even in another state, and then, you know, the comptroller's office has to go through and make sure it meets all the requirements. But still, you know, working at that, and just in the last couple of years, we had 3 villages dissolve, you know, in Keysville, Salem, and Port Henry. We still have Keysville, Salem, and Port Henry. They just don't have a government structure. So they don't disappear. You know, Westport is not a village anymore. And so I still believe that we need more sharing of services. And I think eventually we're going to have to do more cooperation and coordination with our school systems. We just had Westport and Elizabethtown merge, and they have both their elementary and middle school, but their high school. And, you know, they did it well because they did it because it would improve the educational opportunities of their students. And that's really the key, if it can do that. You know, but it's tough when your student enrollment is declining and all, and state aid, you know, becomes questionable sometimes right now especially. So those things have to be looked at. And with technology, you can do a lot more. And I think certainly all this remote learning is giving us all a good lesson. Telemedicine, good lesson.
As you look over your 25 years, last 18 in the Senate, what are your proudest accomplishments?
Helping people. You know, we did a lot of legislation on invasive species, 5 constitutional amendments. The land bank is probably the most significant one that could help us improve our roads and widen our roads and do a lot of things that we need to do, and Forest Reserve was in the way of that.
Before towns could do projects, they would have to get an amendment
Constitutional amendment, yeah.
Which was a long, complicated process.
No one else in the Senate did 5 constitutional amendments, I will tell you, but no one else needed them.
So with the land bank, you can take land from that bank, and it makes it easier for them to get
It
critical
does.
projects done.
Yeah, it actually says that every road can be 59.5 feet wide. Our roads in the Adirondacks are not all 59.5 feet wide. Look at the Cascade Road, and that needs repair, and that needs major repair, and everything on the land side is forest preserve, just about. So you could go into the forest preserve in order to make that road safer, if you needed to. And that's got to be a monumental, major project that's hopefully reaching priority status if we ever get infrastructure money from the federal government.
And speaking of infrastructure, that cell phones in particular have been such an important issue for you, improving cell phone coverage throughout the Adirondacks, but in particular along the Northway, where we saw the tragedy 20 years ago. The gentleman lost his life, had a cell phone but couldn't get a signal.
Right, and when we first started this, they would talk like, everybody doesn't need a cell phone, so what if you can't talk on your cell phone? That's not what it's all about. It's about the health, the safety, and the economy of our area. And we've seen schools go virtual, and God bless the teachers in our area that have had to do that, because as a teacher, I cannot imagine teaching a class of 30 kids and you never see them, you know, and you know what, everybody's in a vacuum like, so. And some of these kids are at home and they have no cell coverage, and some of them have no families that are saying, do your homework, get your work done, you know, what are you doing, playing games instead of this. So there's a lot of damage because of this, and I think there's a lot to be learned. So we cannot be without it, and I cannot foresee that we'll say this will never happen again, because virtual learning is going to be too easy. I mean, even if there's a snow day, they might have virtual learning that day, so kids might never get a day off.
That's right.
That they thought they would have had. But it's a necessity, and it has to be subsidized. I mean, there are people in Plattsburgh that don't have internet service in their homes because they can't afford it. So, like free and reduced lunches, it needs to be something that every family can have and have. And the telemedicine, you know, I think people are going to be healthier, because if you're sick and you don't want to go to a doctor's office and sit in the office and wait, make the appointment, get there, all that, so I'll get better, I'll get better. But you can have a telemedicine call and get medicine and go on, and then maybe go back and get into the office eventually. But I think you'll be addressing your health issues a lot earlier than you would have.
So improving cell service and broadband.
It's a necessity. It has to happen, and we're not going to get the people to come up here and work remotely, you know. And there are people now. There's a gal down the road from me and her husband, and she works for Facebook. I don't know where he works. They haven't been off Glen Lake since March, and they can do it. And so, but you can't do it if you don't have good internet service, and that would help us get more year-round residents.
Is there anything on your wish list that remains there, that after you retire from the Senate you wish you could have gotten to, you wish you could have gotten it passed, but it just never happened?
Well, I wish we could have taller cell towers. I mean, you can make them look like a tree, or you can not look at them, look in the other direction. But to say that you can't have tall cell towers within the Adirondack Park because it spoils the view of the hiker, And actually a cell tower can save the hiker if they get injured or lost or whatever, and we've seen it save people and families. It is just absurd, and I just wish that I could have gotten past that and gotten people to agree to that, because there's still, you know, we're getting a few taller cell towers, but they're talking about 99, 100 feet, and the trees around them have to be as tall. And there's one behind the neighborhood house in Keene Valley, and that tower went up, it was 125 feet, and that's the one they always said, oh, we have a tall tower. I went by it the other day. The trees around it are a lot taller now. So it's a necessity, and it's going to help people live here and have a better economy, better health, better education.
Other than the legislation you've helped push through the years and the changes you've made, how would you like to be remembered?
You know, I've had a great staff, and I've had a great staff because they've worked hard calling people back and getting answers for people, which is something that we have really worked on. And as I said, you know, even if somebody calls up and they're angry with something that happened, they calm down when I call them back. So I think just as somebody who tried hard to help people out, and you know, we've had a lot of successes, and people will be happy. Can't solve everybody's problem, though, and hopefully people feel I've been accessible. So I guess that's what I would want.
We mentioned ORDA. Do you hope to sit on other boards, or what would you, what are you hoping, or what do you want to do in your retirement?
Well, I am on the board of H Hole in the Woods, the camp for seriously ill children that Charlie Woods started along with Paul Newman, and there's camps on. And that's very rewarding, and I should be volunteering there more. So that's on my list to do.
Betty Little, thank you very much for your service for all these years to the North Country and taking
I've
the time.
loved it. I've loved it. I could not think of better career for me. I've loved it. I never anticipated it. I was 19 years stay-at-home mom, you know, and always interested in government, and I've just, it's been beyond my wildest dreams of what I could do and enjoy, and the people I've met. I'll miss it. There's no two ways about it. I will miss it, and but it's been great.
You've had a wonderful career, and we have all benefited from your public service.
And I've benefited from everyone's vote, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.